Now that deaths with X plus comorbidities establish the danger of X, what mandates and laws would you support to combat obesity? Hey, so welcome back, or welcome for the first time. You can like, share, and subscribe if you haven't. I'll be posting content on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays for the foreseeable future. But with this video, I'm going to be talking about, with this presentation podcast, I don't know what I'm going to switch this to. Whatever this is, I'm going to be talking about something with kind of the shorty series where I post certain things on social media. This is on Facebook, on my account. I post some things, and then sometimes people comment or I expand on those things. And in this case, someone commented on this, and I'm going to go over the comments with this thing I just mentioned about the comorbidities and things like that. And I'm going to discuss something, an article from Scientific American, and go into some of the science around this. Not the science, but just the actual science around the whole issue with obesity. I consider myself a recovering fat person. It is a condition. There is something that goes through, whether it's a mix of mental, whether it's a mix of the physical, but there's certain people who have certain biologies that will lend themselves, just the same way some people are allergic to peanuts. Some people eat certain foods and have a certain reaction, the way their body is going to store the fats and things like this. But when it comes down to it, there is the whole thing where it's like, if you're spending 2,000 calories a day and you only eat 2,000 calories a day, you're not going to lose weight. If you have a caloric deficit, you're going to lose weight. If you have a caloric excess, you're going to store that excess as fat or convert it to muscle and things like that. And for some people, different people, it's a different kind of situation because we are diverse in that sense. When it comes down to obesity, I consider obesity to be something that can be combated because you still have to actually eat that food. There's certain things, like if you have cancer, even if I stop doing anything, if I start doing everything as healthy as possible, the cancer will still continue. It's something in you. Even when we're talking about this pandemic that we're going through right now, once you get that virus is in you. There's things you can ingest to try to combat the virus and the effects in it. There's things when you talk about vaccines that can prevent the thing. But when it comes down to actual obesity, even if you have the physical issues where your metabolism doesn't work that well, even if you have the actual mental things, the mental handicaps and the mental issues that I think happen in childhood with the adverse childhood effects that lead to somebody having an unhealthy relationship with food where they have certain stresses and then they go to the food for it. Or in general, you're just feeling stressed and then your body has that reaction, the fight or flight. And I think just biologically in times of stress, your body works in a certain way to store energy because, oh, there's a time of less actual abundance in nature, so you're kind of being adjusted. Whatever food you get, you have to store it in a certain way to protect yourself, whereas when there's actual abundance, there's no war and there's no strife, you can get the stuff that you can burn through your reserves in a pretty way. Your body is a machine that works in those kind of ways. So there is that aspect there. And by now, I don't think I have to tell you. I'm completely amateur with these things. These are just observations that I had and just trying to do my best in laying out my case of why this is important. But regardless, with the obesity itself, it takes your actual continued action to maintain the obesity. Now, there's an inverse where if you just don't eat at all, you can also be unhealthy in that sense. But there is no healthy obesity. By definition, when you have that excess of weight, you are unhealthy. Just like when you have the drop, you are unhealthy. But there is a spectrum between here. There's a place in the middle where every physical body has this general, I don't want to say equilibrium of where you can say this is the Goldilocks zone, like when you're talking about the solar system, how there's a zone where the planet is not just boiling to death from the sun, or it's not just so frozen that nothing happens. There's a Goldilocks zone of health. I think maybe because we're a life form that developed in a Goldilocks zone that exists in the greater universe and things like that, maybe there is something. Even when you look at the Earth, we developed on the equator where there's it's too hot. It's not too hot, but if you go too far up north or south, it gets too cold until we've developed ways to deal with it. And that's a similar thing right now. Right now, we've developed ways in culture and society where you don't have to necessarily maintain that Goldilocks zone of just physical health. There's people who have too much weight, there's people who have too little weight, but there's other things we've built in society that can support those lives. You can have other people do certain tasks for you. You're not necessarily needing to use your physical fitness and your physical strength and your ability of moving around all the time, being able to lift certain things, being able to protect yourself, being able to take down that animal. Those things are not necessarily things that are selected for anymore. So we have different levels of health that can still be successful. But then when you come to something like this, where we live in these these societies, we live in these cultures, and you introduce something like this virus that's going on in the world right now as I record this, that adds something else, and that's a comorbidity, where it's like, okay, in the past, you just had one of these things, and that was probably enough to take you out. That is, if you could even actually be some of these things. Like in the past, in certain places, you just can't be obese because you won't be able to have access to the excess of resources to actually be obese. But you can also suffer from starvation. That's something that I think humans have dealt with more. And that's the thing. There's a speed drawing going on the screen. It's going to be one of the gluttony series. I had this gluttony series with 7 deadly sins, and I think most sins come down to gluttony and greed. Those are the two primary sins in my estimation of it. But there's gluttony, greed as the primary ones, and then there's sloth, lust, envy, wrath, and pride. I think, yeah, that's the 7 of them. So I did these in the past, and I had them be all male besides the lust one, and now I'm in the process of doing the gender-swapped ones for them. There's merchandise already of the original 7 in this series, and I'm going to do these gender-swapped ones. I also have an idea of using these in different stories. I have in mind this game where the actual sins are different characters. This is the way you see in like Final Fantasy or role-playing games and things like that. They have kind of different skins, or, oh, this character comes from the ice area, and then they have different ice versions. So it's like, oh, this character comes from the greed, and then when the greed infects the character and things like that, mutates them to different forms. So there's something there, but that's neither here nor there. But that's the thing going on with this. And you can go down and check it out. There's a lot of other merchandise there you can purchase as well. But that is one of the things. I think it's a sin in that I think it's avoidable. And then I think there are ways to actually address this. I wouldn't consider getting a virus a sin. If you smoke and then you get cancer, maybe that's a different thing where you can say, okay, there's a way you're getting that thing to you. But then the whole idea of the sins kind of going with the gods. I am a-religious, so does sin have to have some higher being that is letting the rules? But anyway, I just like that 7 deadly sins, and I think that term of sins was something that would define certain actions that are in general negative, that if you took them, if you avoided doing these sins, your life would be better for it. And I think this is one of those things where I think the result of this sin, this behavior, these choices that lead somebody to be obese is something that could be combated. I do think a better society would exist if you had a reduction of this. I'm also going to do an inverse of this, where it's going to be like the 7 lively virtues, something. It's going to be the inverse. I'm going to use, I think, mimes or something that's the inverse of clowns to show like the opposites of these. Like, what would the opposite of gluttony be? Some kind of fitness and health. I don't know. There's going to be something I'm going to think of to do that later. But coming back to this, now I'm going to go to the first section of this. Why I'm talking about this is because we've seen something right now with this pandemic, is people have said that whether you believe this or not, I'm just saying for the people who do admit this and say, okay, we're going to say this. If somebody dies with this, the thing that they're showing, oh, this person was tested and they happen to have this virus, but then there's many other things that they had. For most of the people who have died from it, over 90% of the people who have died with or tested with this, when you look at the numbers right now going on in the world, and they say, okay, it's 200,000 in the United States of America, 630-something or 650-something here in Nairobi, Kenya. In Kenya in general, I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, recording this at this time. Those numbers, you look at the actual figures, and pretty much everybody, 90% plus, has had comorbidities, as in they had the virus and something else. They're either old, they had some heart condition, and one of the ones that is mostly common across the spectrum for when you go outside of the ages is obesity. There's a lot of heavier people who have obesity-related conditions and complications that then they get this virus, and that ends up being something that just knocks them over that edge. I personally, as I mentioned, am a recovering fat person. And I've had a journey out of this when I realized I valued my life enough to think I'm actually going to have a future, and to have that future, to have that better future, I need to be fitter for myself and for the things I wanted to accomplish. That was something that took me some time to get to. There was issues I was dealing with that I realized that I'm still coming out of, and I've had my journey. I've talked about that in separate videos, and I will mention that in later times and more specific. It's something that I am willing to converse with people about. It's something I'm aware of. It's something I know people struggle with. I know I struggled with it, and I am a living example of how it can work, and it's worked for other people in different ways, and I'm willing to kind of share how it worked for me. But regardless with that, the point of this initial thing is that people have admitted that yes, we can take, or people have admitted that let's take certain steps to protect both ourselves and other people around us getting to the point where they can mandate, they support government and state top-down mandates to say, you shouldn't do this because if you do this, it raises your risk to die. Now, there are things that have been found with obesity. There's not too many older, heavy people. Like, in general, it just reduces the quality of life. Just coming down, the gravity pulling down on your joints and things like that. The size of the mass that's pulling down and squashing down your bone structure and your internal organs, and the amount of stress it's putting on your heart to pump all the blood around your veins. These are things that are just practical that we understand. And that is, there's a lot more information about those risks than there is about this current virus. Yet we've had people take certain steps to combat it. We're at the point where people have said that, yes, you may not be the one directly suffering from this, but because somebody else can die from it, can be harmed by it, we need to all take steps as a community, as culture, as countries, as people, as society, to prevent those people from possibly dying from that thing, from getting infected and actually dealing with the actual thing, depending on even, hey, they say, okay, the death rate may not be as high. We're not talking about the 2 million dead like one of those initial projections had, but we still don't know what's going to happen in the future of these people. We don't know the complications that are going to happen. Sure, a lot of young people aren't dying, but we don't know that in the future there might be more complications with their ability to breathe and all these other things that are coming in. And that is something that's already proven for obesity. It is less healthy to have a child that's obese. Like, think about it right now. If you actually just had your child, a lot of people right now, if you just exposed your children to environments where this virus supposedly was, people would consider you to be a bad parent. They'd almost consider that to be some form of child abuse. They're saying we need to protect the kids. How come that doesn't apply for something like obesity? How come we're not also taking those steps of that? And with obesity, we have also seen, as I'll get into the conversation, actually, let me just get into the conversation right now, because we get into some of these topics as I ask this, because I was just trying to ask people, some of the people who are supportive of some of these global mandates, these global moves, these billions of dollars being spent to prevent this thing, why don't we also do that in something like obesity, which I'll make the case from the figures that are out there, is far more dangerous and leads to a lot more deaths than anything we've actually seen from this virus, especially when you're talking about counting that it's not just primarily from the virus. It's not somebody simply being obese and then they sit there and because of the fat in their body, it kills them by suffocation or something. But no, they're obese and then they get something else. So if you can say obesity was a comorbidity when they got the virus, you could technically say since they had the obesity first and then they get the virus was a comorbidity. Or let's say somebody has the virus and then they become obese, would that be them getting the obesity after? And then the virus was an underlying condition and then the obesity kind of increased their ability to die from it. Just how obesity would be the underlying condition and then you get the virus and that raises the chance of you. So if you can do the inverse, let's see what happens in that conversation. Okay, so the first person, CJ, we're just going to put CJ as the person here. They know who they are if they listen to this. Okay, they said, to be fair, I feel the same way about obesity and seatbelts. If I want to be fat and die, fine. If I want to not wear a seatbelt and die, fine. But if my obesity is airborne and causes someone else to die, then you don't need government intervention. Why should some other fat idiot cause me to die? Now, there's a back and forth with this individual, and I think I'll just read what I said, then maybe add the comments after, because I addressed some of the points and he responds several times. Okay. If mandates are there to close X, adjust Y, and adopt Z to prevent other people from dying, then why not close junk food restaurants, adjust serving size limits, and at-risk people should wear masks to prevent eating certain foods, etc. Some state regulations already exist to address this. Some people may be entirely supportive of someone saying they have been tested negative so they don't need to wear a mask, but think everyone else should wear one. But I've seen folk that support mask mandates and say everyone should wear one. I explicitly asked them if people that don't have it should as well, and some said yes. One added thing is how comorbidity is treated. Like, I don't think a COVID acceptance movement would be embraced. Yeah, 99% of fat people don't seem to be dropping dead at the moment from obesity. Well, what's the figures of those proven to have the Rona? So that one I'm just asking, like, okay, so if you're saying that most people who are fat don't really seem to be struggling from it and having any overtly negative effects from it, the same can be said about the current Rona pandemic. So that's not an argument. We've already gotten beyond that point. People are saying just because you're asymptomatic doesn't mean it's not an issue, doesn't mean there's not a danger. So what I'm trying to get at here, which I don't think he addressed in any of his responses, is that somebody who is obese but doesn't have any overtly negative things, like, oh, I just feel okay. Look, I'm still working out. I'm still exercising. I don't have any problem. I still run marathons. They could technically be asymptomatic from the condition of obesity. It could still kill them, but just because they seem to be healthy, seem to be doing okay, seem to not have any negative effects from it, doesn't mean they aren't with a condition. Okay, so this was CJ's response to that. Because the US government supports corn farming not because it makes us fat, but because it's the most efficient way to grow calories and to help people from starving. ... Do people overindulge? Yes. ... Is that their choice? Yes. ... Does anyone care if someone drives drunk? Nope, not really. ... Until that choice ends someone's life. ... Now we care. ... I think I'll say ellipses after this. He puts them a lot. Now we need regulation. Ellipses. Can we solve obesity? Ellipses, yep. Ellipses, McDonald's in the UK, ellipses, fries, ellipses, 4 ingredients, ellipses, US, ellipses, 22 ingredients. There's an overuse of ellipses here, CJ. Come on now. I use ellipses a lot, but never close to this much. We can do better, but it's our choice, ellipses. People that don't want to wear a mask don't believe they're driving drunk, ellipses, but they are. They can be drunk and not realize they're endangering others' lives, ellipses. So they think not wearing a mask is their personal choice to be obese, ellipses. It's not. It's like smoking a cigarette in the elevator in the 60s, ellipses. You are indirectly hurting others. And I like that. I mean, in general, it seems to be some things in there. It didn't necessarily address all the questions I had above, but this was my response to that. Okay, CJ, yeah, subsidies aren't targeted to make us fat. About efficiency, I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't think those subsidies are necessarily about efficiency. They might have started with that, but now it's influence and money in politics is a mess. If you've listened to my channel before, there's a lot of other videos I have about just my opinion on politics. I'm more of an anarcho-capitalist in the actual classical sense of anarchism, not in what Donald Trump and other people are calling these Antifa-type people. Okay, so back to this. Supermarkets seem to work quite well without needing government control. And I got a separate video about the supermarkets and things like that. Okay, so people get arrested for driving drunk even if you don't kill anyone. So yes, people care that others drive drunk. McDonald's in different countries is a good thing to do. The nuggets in Rome were fabulous. I lived in Rome. Yeah, the nuggets are really good. Preferred American burgers, though. As I mentioned, some people say masks should be mandated even if you have been shown to not have the virus. Should masks be mandated in your home? Why shouldn't the government be concerned about you potentially killing your family? With the current figures of whatever you think is accurate about the Rona threat, do you think the vaccine should be mandatory for people to return to jobs that interact with public, or things like little kids must have the vaccine to go back to school? The state DGAF about health. Don't give a something. I'm going to try to keep the curse words out of this. Maybe that might help myself actually get these videos and content out there. If they really did, cigarettes and alcohol would be illegal. I think obesity is more of an issue than the coronavirus from what I've seen. Virus spreads differently and could have longer lasting effects. I still don't know of, so that may change. I don't want them to tell me I have to wear a mask, or tell me I have to go anywhere that people choose not to wear them. Supply the information and let people choose. This is on obesity issues and the masks. If the owner of a store decides that everyone in there should wear one, let them. I'll wear it if I need something in that store. If someone says anyone who eats my food needs to be below 25 body mass indexed, then let them. I'll go online and snipe their recipes and make them for myself, if I really feel the need that I must have that specific food. Well, actually, I think I'm actually below the 25 BMI right now, But what I'm saying is that let folk make their choices on their own. So that was the initial comments, and I addressed that. If you have any questions, also let me know. If you have any thoughts, like some of these times, with some of these things, it's a bit frustrating. Where I want to increase actually having these in conversation form, live conversations, and I have a conversation series with my friend Steven, and I have a few people lined up for different ones, and I will be presenting something to kind of open up conversations where if I post this, I say, hey, if you're willing, if you want to actually discuss this particular topic, maybe I'll start doing a thing where I'll just post that short thought out there and then let other people on other platforms comment, and then later on be like, hey, do you want to actually have this as part of the conversation series where we talk over this? Because I think when you have these kind of conversations, you put down the lines. If somebody puts questions, I normally try to address them point by point, but here it seems like the person just decided not to address certain points that I was making. That's a bit frustrating. That I think is not as frequently done when you're actually having an in-person conversation. Okay, so CJ did a different response and said this. Question is then, do you think government should be involved in regulating whether daycare center employees can smoke cigarettes while they work with the kids, or should a free market decide and no government involvement is needed, and why? And I appreciate this because this is kind of what I was getting to, where I'm trying to understand where people think there should be actual involvement with state governments. Who should be telling you what to do due to what threat in what sorts of levels? So here's my response to that. I don't think they're needed for that. State does not equal government, which is an important distinction. I don't think you'd send your kids to a daycare where the employees smoked in front of them. There was a time then that was legal from the state government, from that same state government that you're talking about now. State government has had slavery as a legal thing and enforced it with their police and criminal justice system. I don't go for the, if X isn't illegal, then there'll be an explosion of people doing X kind of people. That's something that really frustrates me. Okay, I think it's BS when it's said about theologies, and it's BS with state governments. I'm not choosing to not murder because of the 10 Commandments or the laws of whatever government runs the state I happen to be in at the time. This is a short enough video about the potential ways of doing things. And this is a video I linked there, and I'll also have a link here. Maybe I'll have it in an article link below, but it's on my channel as well. And it's Nations by Consent, Decomposing the Nation State, which was me reading this essay by Murray M. Rothbard. It's a great essay, and if you're on YouTube, there's a link on the screen right now. You can actually click that. Okay, back to my response. If you want more, another example though, there are certain groups advocating segregation now, black-only spaces. Before the 60s, when the state mandated black-only schools, would you support that due to it being legal? Right now, if you found out there was a school that now, by state mandate, said your child has to be in white privilege courses, while the children of color are being segregated to be given extra lessons to catch up on things they have been found to be systematically deprived of, would you support that because it's legal? And this is a friend of mine from high school, and I think they would fall into any definition that you want to call white people in the United States of America, and I know they have kids themselves with another friend of mine that is white. So it's like, yeah, I'm kind of asking them, and no response was given to this. I'd be interested to see what they would say to this, but yeah, no response was given. This is another comment we're going to move on to. Is there anything else I'm addressing with this? Yeah, okay, no. So moving on to the next comment, again, they commented on a different topic and a different kind of thought process. And this is the thing. This is why I like posting these things. I like posting them out there and then seeing from this small thought that I have, what kind of ideas does it bring out from people, and then they just give me content that I come out and I make these things for you out there. And again, I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to this, you guys and gals. Let me keep that out. Someone was saying, I've joked about this before, but people say with the guys or gals type of thing, it's like, oh, it's gender neutral. Then I'm saying, like, it was a joke where it's like, oh, a guy says, oh, guys is just gender neutral. Then he says, how many guys have you slept with? Yeah, I think guys and gals it has a gender connotation to it. Okay, so peeps. I think peeps is, how many peeps have you slept with? I think peeps is more general. Okay, so this is the next question that CJ had. You say, let folk make choices on their own. I agree, that is the seatbelt conclusion. Ellipses. The cigarette conclusion is, turns out your choices can cause me to die. So that's bad. Ellipses. If I eat too many beans and fart in an elevator, I'm still laughing at fart jokes. If I eat too many beans and fart in an elevator, I impacted everyone's life, but they will live. Humanity doesn't accept others' choices that result in death. Ellipses. And government steps in because if it doesn't, the next challenger surely will run a campaign on that very issue. Yeah, I think there's some good points in there. So this was my response to that. Depends on how direct the death. I don't know what humanity you mean there about choices that result in death. For example, you've seen how selective Black Lives Matter is on which deaths are unacceptable. You've seen the issues being brought up with abortion. You've seen the gods people worship, the people we consider heroes. Individual humans want to reduce their chances of dying, for sure. Humans in general may not want to do the killing, but they don't really mind the concept of other people dying instead of them. Hell, for a long time, it was a central part of being a desirable mate that you'd be willing to kill another human on behalf of your mate. From gangsters to military up to politicians, choosing to kill is acceptable. So unless you mean other things by those words, I don't agree with the statement that, quote, humanity doesn't accept others' choices that result in death, end quote. I think you guys can see that. Like, what I'm trying to say here is actually humanity living often demands the death of other life forms. That's something that we deal with, and I think some of us are a lot more removed from that. A small percentage of us is a lot more removed from that reality of just day-to-day life than we were in the past when we were still closer to just authentic, organic nature, I think. Okay, back to my response. Now on to obese people. Here's an example. They use the limited healthcare resources more. The healthcare that can be taken up dealing with obesity-related issues that would otherwise be divvying up checkups for people with conditions that are not as preventable. So it's a matter of perspective. As I mentioned, of which you have yet to address, there are people saying that you literally have to wear a mask even if they accept the person does not have the virus, for other reasons such as social proof. Direct question here, based on the current data. Do you think all children should be mandated to take a vaccine before being allowed back into school? If there should be laws about wearing masks in public, then why should that protection not extend to your home, where you may spend much more time in close proximity of other people? So that was some of my frustration, as I mentioned before. Some of the questions were not addressed here. They're talking about these things. Okay, the fart might not directly kill somebody, but you don't know. You could have something. What if you have coronavirus in your fart? If it can technically come out from your breathing, then maybe your fart can give somebody the virus, and then they can die from it. So that's something that's possibly there. But as I mentioned here, there's things where now we're talking about the shutdown and the effects of these things. Some people haven't been in the hospital to have certain checkups. Certain places have had certain quarantines. People have certain fears and certain limitations from being able to go to certain locations. Certain people are losing jobs, not going to have the ability to have a healthcare plan, have the insurance to actually afford to do certain checkups and maintain certain things. There's the suicides that are involved in these things. So you can't just say, oh, if I do this, it's entirely different. So you might have other arguments of why this is completely different and off the pale, and let me know if you think that's something with it. So to finish up this, before I get to the next part of this this presentation of the reading, there is something here that another friend mentioned. This is GJP. I was going to actually say the last name. GJP, if you know who you are, you've commented occasionally here, so I think you're actually going to listen to this. They said this: a couple of months ago, I was berated on public transportation by a morbidly obese Hispanic gentleman who was using a cane to walk for not wearing a mask. So you see, you have this thing where people feel the need right now. They say, you're a possible danger to yourself and others, so you have to do certain behavior. I can berate you. I can call you an outright murderer because you're using limited actual issues. There's some things with obesity when it goes even further. There's certain complications if somebody's doing a regular surgery, if somebody is more obese. What if that happens and then the doctor is like, okay, goes through these things and then loses the patient, and then the doctor feels and falls into depression, commits suicide, or just doesn't work as well anymore, and then you get to the point where that doctor could have saved many other lives if this one patient had been healthier and was able to actually save this life due to the complications of cutting through the fat. So there's other things in this. The amount of money that's spent on things like gastric bypass versus if that money had been spent on cancer, for example, what would be the difference? What would the things be changing? You have people who are literally starving. If you just have a situation, we know people still die from lack of food. There is a global waste gap. So if you had a way to take this food, this abundance of food that people have in certain areas, this abundance of calories, and transfer that to another place? Wouldn't that help them? Just how you talk about, oh, there's these differing situations where these people seem to have more access to tests and more access to better livelihoods to reduce the chance of them catching this virus, yet these other people have a higher chance of catching it, so we need to do something about that. There is something like that right there. There's some people who have a higher chance of catching that disease of lack of food, of starvation, if you want to call it that, of just not being able to eat. We're constantly trying to fight off that death. We're dying alive. That's actually why the name of my channel is. You're constantly dying. You're constantly in the condition, and everything you eat, all actual calories you ingest, are a form of medication. It's a form of drug that is combating the constant condition of death that our body is going through. So there is something in that, and some people have an abundance of that drug, any kind of caloric drug that prevents the starvation death of the physical body, and some people have lack of it. So there is an issue here. Now I'm going to transition to the next part of this presentation, this talk, whatever this is, this rant. This is a rant-a-thon. It's going to be a rant. I'm going to try to do these other things where instead of just the short thing where I focus on one thing, expand and have at least 3 different things in here. So the next thing is going to be this thing, starting with this meme. It's going to be on the screen right now. This is a bit into the whole meme whisperer. I have an entire series where it's this meme whisperer. I focus on the memes itself, but this one, the meme isn't that important. But as you can see, it's one of those kind of faces, the raid comic faces or whatnot. This is a guy with like the I effing love science shirt and things like the science instead of just the whole like actual scientific method. Also, I have a separate video about the difference between those two things. Like science, this is my comment to it, and he's holding up a phone with this tweet from Scientific American, and this is what it said. Scientific American has never endorsed a presidential candidate in our 175-year history until now. The 2020 election is literally a matter of life and death. We urge you to vote for health, science, and Joe Biden for president. And then the guy's like with his mouth open, like, holding the phone. So, when I look at this, one of my earliest videos, and something that has made my life, made it a lot more, made me able to deal with people a lot more, is to constantly remind myself that people literally mean figuratively. And this is my response to this when I posted this meme. What does literally even mean anymore? Not going to just blow this off, because good chance that this could literally be a primary reason that about 5,000 to 10,000 people actually go through the process of voting for Biden if they keep regular advertising going on and scores them also virtue signal points in their core demographic. And remember, the science does not equal the scientific method. So a bit of an analysis on this before we get into the reading from this article from Scientific American and UC. So someone else posted this actual tweet itself and then said, okay, this is going to lose them some Trump supporters or some conservatives or things like that. And then somebody else commented there and said, I can't imagine any actual Trump supporters who read Scientific American. And my response to that person was, okay, is this part of that literally mean figuratively thing? Because I asked him, I know this might be going to, you're just talking about hyperbole, this is just hyperbole. Hyperbole, do you say hyperbole or hyperbole? I think it's hyperbole. Anyway, so it could be hyperbole, but I was asking the person, can you literally not imagine somebody doing that? I would think that majority of the people, as I mentioned in this comment, majority of the listeners, or the people who are still reading Scientific American, probably won't care about this. It probably won't sway them one way or another, but I think they could be 5,000, 10,000 people. But can they truly not imagine there being somebody who would vote for Trump who reads the Scientific American? Like, what kind of character do they have of Scientific American actual readers or Trump voters? It's kind of an odd thing. Even the person who commented, they commented that on the person's thing, who I think is somebody who will vote for Trump most likely, who is known to this person, who probably reads Scientific American. And I previously had read Scientific American, and if you listen to some of the stuff, I have a reason. I've talked about why I support President Donald J. Trump and think he's going to win in landslide fashion coming year 2020. But anyway, so back to this thing. So when you're reading this thing, what do they literally mean here by literally? I've talked about this, and I'll expand on this in a separate video because I think it's very important. When you do actually vote for somebody, you are making a life or death decision. Now, this might not be directly. As I mentioned earlier, people don't really they don't really despise the idea of somebody's life being taken for them. When you vote for somebody, you are voting for somebody who's going to make life or death decisions, whether it's directly for you or other people. Whether it's that sort of thing where they say, okay, that person needs to go bomb this person, and then that goes to the general, that goes down to the whatever group is doing it, then whoever has the drone flies that drone up. Whoever's actually fitting the missiles and bombs onto the drone loads the drone. That drone flies up, it gets fueled and everything. So that's already 5 or 6 people involved in there. And then that plane flies on whatever ship it's on, then goes and drops the bomb and kills people there. That's a direct thing. Because you voted for that person actually ended up getting in this whole drone situation that ended up killing somebody. Now, if you get to somebody and you just say, okay, this person doesn't think this is actually important enough of an issue and put scientific funding into this other thing, that could lead to somebody that you know or you personally getting some kind of illness that could have been actually funded and could have had research to find a cure to, but because you voted for somebody else, that cure isn't there, and then you end up dying. So there's different ways, and that is the same thing with something like obesity. When it comes down to it, you might think it's a personal thing, but you having that excess of calories could have complications and issues that lead to somebody else dying. It could be a simple thing where it's like, oh, you're obese and then you don't have the strength and ability to protect somebody or to save somebody close to you who could have used your help, and then that person dies. Or there's other things that are involved with this. Part of the reason I think people get into obesity is adverse childhood situations, adverse childhood issues, and then they seek food for comfort. So this is the thing, somebody made other decisions in their life that affected your life, that damaged you in a way that now ends up with you seeking out food that could be a comorbidity, that when you get this virus that's going around, you end up dying. Whereas if that person hadn't done that thing in your past, in your history, to mess you up, maybe you would have been healthier and made different decisions and not even been in the location where you got that virus to begin with. And let's say you were still in that location, you'd have been healthier and you'd have fought the thing off. You might have just been asymptomatic. So there's things that are involved in that. So that's why I'm saying there should be something in here. When you look at the kids, there were these 2 twins, African American or black twins that died from this. They were extremely obese. When you look at certain things, when you talk about the black community, that's going to get to this article that we're coming up with, you look at the higher levels of people actually being hospitalized with this, and some of those people are more obese than the other people. So these are questions to look at. So let's get into this article. And this is something, I went over this article, and there was a part in it that just, yeah, it made me cringe. And I don't know if I should do the comorbidity thing first. I think we should do the comorbidity first, because this is going to be a short kind of skim of this. This is the definition of what a comorbidity is. Defining comorbidity, implications for understanding health and services. And this is from the ncbim.com. I might leave links to it. You can find this, or you can just type that out there and you can find the definition of this. I'm going to read you the abstract here. I think, the abstract is all I'm going to read because the article itself is a bit longer. You can read a lot of the paper there. So abstract, comorbidities associated with worse health outcomes, more complex clinical management, and increased healthcare costs. There is no agreement, however, on the meaning of the term, and related constructs such as multimorbidity, morbidity burden, and patient complexity are not well conceptualized. In this article, we review definitions of comorbidity and the relationship to related constructs. We show that the value of a given construct lies in its ability to explain a particular phenomenon when interest within the domains of 1. Clinical care, 2. Epidemiology, or 3. Health service planning and financing. Mechanisms that may underlie the coexistence of 2 or more conditions in a patient: direct causation, association risk factors, heterogeneity, independence, are examined, and the implications for clinical care considered. We conclude that the more precise use of constructs, as proposed in the article, would lead to improved research in the phenomenon of ill health in clinical care, epidemiology, and health services. The key words here are comorbidity, multimorbidity, chronic disease, and etiology. And let me check what the etiology means. It's just a new word that I would like to be familiar with, and might as well tell you here since I've actually said the word. So the more information, I think, the better. And this is the time we have the age of understanding where we just have access to information. Etiology, the cause, set cause, or manner of causation of a disease or a condition. And that is something that's going on right now with this pandemic. What was the etiology? Was it the 15 days to flatten the curve and now we're months into this thing? What are the actual results of it? And that's the same thing with obesity. I think there's a lot more information there about the threat, the danger, the negative effects, and ways to actually address obesity than there is with this current pandemic. Yet look at what has been done with the pandemic. Why is that something that is voiced and talked about in that way? And the things that it demands. Well, now we'll get to this article. And just thinking about this thing when I skimmed this thing, I was like, okay, this is going to be part of this whole journey that we're on. And again, thank you for being on this journey with me. Almost at the end here. This is from Scientific American, and this is the kind of articles that are in there, and some of the things are okay, some of the stuff is okay, and it's something that I've talked about before. Where it's like, okay, the science, like some things, like how scientific are they? If you have an article where 99% of the article, when you talk about also something with this, 99% of this website is just people just reporting scientific method things. This happens, you add this, you do this test, and this is the result. Then you have a 1% that really gets a lot of play out there, that's more opinions and people adding these different things in there. And we'll get to the point here, and let me just try to read through it, and then I'll come back to the actual point that really made me shudder, and maybe you'll see it too as I read through this. So this is from Scientific American, Behavior and Society, and this is the opinion section, and this is by Chin Zhou on August 23rd of 2020. Another misguided war on obesity is the title. Boris Johnson's new campaign is focusing on personal responsibility rather than attacking poverty and inequality, the root causes of obesity. And there's a picture of Boris Johnson with a bow and an arrow, I think with one of those like sucker type of things, those things that stick onto windows or flat things. It's not an actual arrow, but I think it's just something to play with kids. Maybe it's part of those kind of things. Yeah, you go out and you be more active type of things. Okay, so let's get into the reading. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson recently unveiled a Better Health campaign to combat obesity. The announcement was prompted by Johnson's bout with COVID-19, which included a stint in intensive care in April. Johnson is convinced that his reported body mass index of 36, 30 is considered obese, was responsible for the severity of his infection and is now on a mission to slim down the United Kingdom. Johnson's proposed interventions include banning junk food advertising before 9 p.m. to reduce the likelihood that children would be exposed to such ads, preventing stores from selling unhealthy snacks at entrances and checkouts, barring buy one and get one free promotions on unhealthy foods, and requiring restaurants with over 250 employees to post calorie counts. Other measures include encouraging doctors to prescribe cycling, Johnson's favorite mode of transportation, and facilitating access to weight loss programs. Critics of Johnson's anti-obesity measures rightly charge that they are incomplete because they focus on personal responsibility rather than attacking the root causes of obesity, poverty, and inequality. Others have pointed out that in the past, that calorie counts in restaurants have negligible effects on consumer behavior. As a researcher and educator on the history and politics of obesity, I would also caution that Johnson and lawmakers from other countries who might follow in his footsteps should tread carefully. Weight is a delicate issue, and mishandling wars on fat or obesity could impair rather than improve the physical and mental health of people with obesity. This is not to say that we should ignore links between obesity and COVID-19. There is mounting evidence that obesity is the most significant risk factor in serious cases of COVID-19, possibly second only to age. Studies of populations in China, Italy, the United States, France, and Britain have shown that people with obesity may double the risk of being hospitalized or dying from COVID-19, and that relationships between weight and COVID-19 are particularly pronounced among younger people and men. 42% of American adults are classified as obese. There are a number of explanations as to why obesity can aggravate COVID-19 infections. Scientists have found that COVID-19 often enters the body through an enzyme called ACE2, and that people with fat tissue have more ACE2 receptors and are therefore more susceptible to infection and higher viral loads. Once infected with COVID-19, some doctors have proposed that because fat tissue compresses the diaphragm and lungs, those with obesity experience greater difficulty breathing. Another popular theory is that obesity may interfere with proper function of immune cells and trigger an excessive immune response called the cytokine storm, resulting in potentially life-threatening inflammation and organ failure. Some researchers have also suggested that irregular levels of hormones associated with obesity, like glucose-regulating adiponectin and weight-regulating leptin, compromise immune responses to the virus. As researchers continue to investigate links between obesity and COVID-19, countries and public health organizations would be well advised to devote renewed attention to obesity. In doing so, public health initiatives may learn from the mistakes of previous campaigns that stigmatized people with obesity as lazy, weak-willed, and gluttons for junk food. In 2012, both Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Georgia's largest pediatric healthcare system, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota launched controversial ad campaigns that critics have justly characterized as fat-shaming. One Georgia poster featured 4 overweight children with captions such as, "Big bones didn't make me this way, big meals did." Meanwhile, the Minnesota ads targeted parents. One of its commercials featured a large man at a fast food outlet carrying a tray of burgers, hot dogs, fries, onion rings, and sugary beverages. As the man blithely walked toward his booth, he overheard his overweight son in competition with another boy over whose father could eat the most. He suddenly felt ashamed. I fear that these types of misguided ads and anti-obesity campaigns might resurface in the COVID-19 era, and that the pandemic will provide added ammunition to the notion that people with obesity are social and medical scourges. Overweight children may be subjected to more bullying by peers if there are internet ads, commercials, posters, and billboards stigmatizing people with obesity and their alleged diet and exercise habits. Among adults, anonymous commentators of news stories about COVID-19 are already posting that people's fates are the results of poor lifestyle habits. A claim reminiscent of the 1980s and early 1990s when anti-gay voices maintained that people died of AIDS because of their homosexual lifestyle. Furthermore, stigmatizing people for their weight would be inimical to the current reckoning of racial injustice, as African American women and Latino children are the most disproportionately affected by obesity in the United States. To those who insist that blunt messaging is necessary to underscore the gravity of obesity, just as sensationalistic anti-tobacco ads were needed to drive home the dangers of smoking, public health research has shown that not only is the stigma ineffective, it can induce people with obesity to gain rather than shed pounds. Studies have found that both children and adults subjected to weight-based bullying or discrimination are more likely to seek solace in binge eating, to develop eating disorders, and to be discouraged from exercise due to the anxieties about their bodies being on display. Stigmatizing people for their weight could also impair mental health and create added stress, which could result in elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol and the increased heart rate, blood pressure, and weight. To avoid these consequences, campaigns to reduce obesity should focus on the positive aspects of maintaining healthy diet and exercise habits. And because lower-income Americans and racial minorities are more likely to live in neighborhoods with comparatively fewer supermarkets and green spaces, public policy interventions should also ensure access to affordable, healthy foods and spaces that facilitate exercise and recreation. Such interventions align with the consensus among obesity experts that weight is the function of the interaction between genes and the environment. Finally, it is imperative that anti-obesity initiatives also include an educational component in which the public and even healthcare providers are informed about the effects of weight bias. Rebecca M. Poole and Chelsea A. Ewer, leaders in this area of research, point to studies revealing that health professionals sometimes regard patients with obesity as lazy, lacking in self-discipline, dishonest, unintelligent, annoying, and non-compliant with treatment, and that medical appointments with heavier patients are shorter than those with thinner patients. Patients with obesity perceive these slights, reporting that healthcare providers do not take them seriously, erroneously assume that their weight is responsible for all their ailments, and condescend to them about losing weight. Hospital gowns, examination tables, and medical equipment that are not designed for larger bodies exacerbate the embarrassment and indignities they experience. As a result, patients with obesity may forego subsequent medical care, including life-saving cancer screenings. On the surface, at least Boris Johnson seems to have come to appreciate the importance of approaching obesity with more compassion. In 2004, he wrote a newspaper column headlined, "Face it, it's all your own fat fault." Now he reassures the British public that his anti-obesity program is not meant to be excessively bossy or nannying, adding, "We want this one to be really sympathetic to people, to understand the difficulties that people face with their weight, and just to be helpful." And that's it for this article. That was by Chin Zhou. Chin Zhou, PhD, is a senior lecturer in American history and health and humanities scholar at the Charles Perkins Center, a diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity research center at the University of Sydney. So, do you think, did you pick up the thing that really creeped me out? That in this, the main thing, there's several things I take issue with, and there's some things that I've mentioned before. These are things that are agreed on, but then problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. Now, I think me and Chin Zhou, or it could be Zhao or Zhou, I could be saying that wrong, but I think we'd agree that obesity is an issue. By definition, obesity is an issue, and there's negative effects here. There's a part, though, in this article that really, it literally made me cringe. Like, I literally had a cringe in my back, and this could be because I had a related conversation with somebody else. And again, people literally mean figuratively. This other individual had been talking to me about what they think love does, and they were like, yeah, love actually makes you do things that you do not want for other people that you love. And like, that's not how I would define love. That sounds kind of like a horrible thing. That sounds like obsession. That sounds like lust. That is one of those 7 deadly sins type of things. I think love should stick to something that is more of a positive, cooperative kind of environment, and something that you are virtuous yourself when you see the virtues in somebody else, as an involuntary action to that, reaction to that. So that was something. And then the way they were talking about this particular situation, it's almost like they didn't have responsibility. So with that, maybe you will understand the thing that really creeped me out about this. And I'll just read it here again. Critics of Johnson's anti-obesity measures rightly charge that they are incomplete because they focus on personal responsibility rather than attacking the root causes of obesity, poverty, and inequality. This part here, it rankles me because there's reasons outside of myself as to why I was obese. But when it came down to it, I had to take the personal responsibility and manage how many calories I was putting into myself. Manage the self-awareness, the self-knowledge, to actually go in and see what was it about my history, what was it about my current life, what was it about my observations about the future that were putting me in a place where I personally did not feel worthwhile to actually improve my health. Because literally when it comes down to it, there's very few people literally being forced to put food in their mouth. There's messaging and things out there. Just like when you're talking about this virus, they say, oh, President Trump is doing bad because he's messaging to people that they shouldn't wear a mask. So if you say Trump should be stopped from messaging to people that they shouldn't wear a mask because it's harmful, then why is it wrong for Boris Johnson to say we need to stop messaging to people to eat certain foods because it leads to harm? Why is there some double standard there? And I'm not one for fat shaming. I was thinking that I was a bit taken aback that, and I really thanked my mom for this, is one of the few people in my life who kept occasionally mentioning my weight and things like that. I was wondering, why were other people in my life seeing me be obese, seeing me do this slow suicide, and not object, not say something, not be like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that to yourself? If somebody was an alcoholic, if somebody was just a drug addict, would you not go and say, you're killing yourself? And that's a similar thing you're doing. You're killing yourself with the food in some cases. People are literally just committing slow suicides, and people just pretend, oh, it's a delicate issue. No, being an alcoholic is not a delicate issue. Just like we're talking about with the initial thing from CJ when he's talking about people driving a car. If somebody is wasted, if somebody is just completely has walked out of the bar and you think you care for this person and you're sober and you see that person going to their vehicle and you just let them get in the car, I'm questioning how much you care about that person's life. And that is a similar thing with obese people. You see so many people in these shows of the obese people and the things like My 600-Pound Life and these other things. There's one YouTuber, Amberlynn Reed, she's got major issues. And you see when it comes to these people, there's almost always an enabler. There's almost always somebody getting them that food. When you're 600 pounds and moribund and you can't leave your bed, there's people bringing you food. Imagine if there's somebody, my 6-pack an hour life, where you see somebody just constantly drunk and somebody just keeps bringing them that alcohol. What would you think about that person? That person would be a neighbor. You would not think that my 6-pack a day life. Somebody's smoking 6 packs of cigarettes a day to the fact that they can't even breathe anywhere. They can't leave their house. So somebody else needs to go to the store and keep bringing them cigarettes. What would you say about this person? Is this person against putting the whole Surgeon General's warning on cigarettes? Because we've seen the damage of that. This person is saying we should just advertise alcohol to everyone. We shouldn't have an age limit on who can drink. We shouldn't say people shouldn't be driving and drunk because that messaging doesn't work. They understand some messaging work. When it comes specifically to COVID-19, how much shaming is going on of people who don't wear masks? How much shaming is going on of people who are not actually socially distancing? There are these things that are being said that we don't know how effective they are. How much shaming is going on for people who are saying, "Oh, we're not going to wait till the vaccine. Oh, we need to open things up now so people can go back and live their lives." How much shaming is going on for people who are talking about, "Oh, these people are saying we need to open up the hospitals. We need to return to this because people need to go and get screenings." There's currently people who are like, "I'm too afraid to go there. The hospital is closed. I can't go and get this thing because of these different things, these different shutdowns that we're doing." Yet you talk about this thing, oh, because you shamed somebody about their fat, now they're not going to go to the hospitals. They're not going to go and get screenings. So that's just something I wanted to bring up here. Now, I think CJ would be somebody who might read Scientific American. There may be many people out there who have started hearing some of the things that I was saying at the start of this, and we're at the end here, and thank you for listening to all this stuff, who might have been thinking you're just somebody on the political right, you're one of those anarcho-capitalists, crazy people, libertarian, autist people, what are you talking about all this thing with governments? What makes you think that the government is in the right position to do this? I haven't read Boris Johnson's plan. I don't. There's some positive things and there's some negative things. There's something called the law of unintended consequences. Like, I don't think there's going to be somebody who's sitting out there and thinking, okay, my restaurant could go to, we have 251 people and then we need to hire like maybe 2 or 3 more people, and we're not going to do it now because we'd have to maybe print new menus and then hire and put it on our website, the actual calorie count. I don't think they would stop that, but there's some unintended consequences where someone's like, okay, if you get over 50 employees, you have to start offering them this certain insurance package. You get to a point where you have a business and it's running at 50 employees and you're earning $1 million a year, and you're able to pay everybody, all your employees, get the actual supplies that you need for your business, pay whatever the regulations, and then get to the point where you're like, okay, you can hire 2 or 3 more people, and then you'd be able to maybe get it up to 1.1 million, but you'd have to all of a sudden now give certain things to your employees that would cost you 1.5 million. So it would take some time before you actually decide to go up to that other point, to that other price point, and then it's going to limit your actual growth of thing. You're going to stick at that 50-point place instead of taking the years between the point where you're going in the red in order to actually afford all these other things that kick in at that point. So there's some things that are complicated with this. The people that he's targeting and things like this, why target one thing? Like, why 250? What kind of study came down to figure out 250 would be the appropriate number for that? Now, on the inverse here, when it comes down to them saying, okay, they're saying it's poverty is the primary issue that leads to this and not personal responsibility. And as I mentioned before, there could be certain issues. Why do black women have the mentality? When it comes down to something with Latinx or children, when you think of that, Latinx children, with its inequality, and I have a separate video about talking about the inequality thing that comes down to, is capitalism the actual inverse of equity? Let's say you say equality socialism, then is equity capitalism? The whole idea of inequality and equality when it comes to actual humans, I think is completely wrong. Just like here, there's no one size fits all in the way that the government can come in and say, this is the way we're going to fix this. We need to attack poverty in this one particular way. The issues that lead to the poverty of many individuals are myriad. There's one thing that is common where it says, okay, if you do 2 or 3 of these things, let's say you do all 3 of them, and it says like 99% of the people in the United States of America, in the developed world, who have done all 3 of these things happen to do it. Now, correlation does not imply causation, but these are the 3 things. I think it's wait until you're in your 20s, mid 20s to have children, graduate from high school, and then keep a job for 1 year before you're in your 20s or in that mid 20s time. And from those people, those are things they've found out that are very high indicators of you being in getting out of poverty and not being in poverty, whatever poverty is defined at in the place that you are. You can get into low middle class, and above. Those are the things. So whatever needs, why do certain things happen to keep certain people in poverty? Why does it happen to be? Are these things related to that? Are there a lot of single parent kind of situations where the people are under a lot of stress raising a kid by themselves, or they're in certain abusive relationships when they were kids and coming up that result in certain issues that they deal with, they're unable to do certain things and achieve certain things and have the mental capacity and comfort and confidence to actually do certain things. Like this whole idea of personal responsibility. No, we need to encourage the personal responsibility because there may be things that are outside of your ability to change. There are things that happened in the past is gone. But to go forward, you need to encourage people to get that personal responsibility and see what can they personally do in order to actually affect that, in order to change that. More of, can I do this? Or how can we work together? And less of, you can't do that, and I demand you participate in this. And I think we have a better world when you come to that situation. So why is it that these certain groups, and they're talking about this with the Latin children, Latinx children, or whatever you want to call them. It's a form of child abuse. Because if you're a child and you are obese, your parents are putting a higher amount of calories into you. It's a similar thing where if you found out that some parent was intentionally exposing their child to environments that had a high amount of this COVID-19 virus, you would consider that abusive. You would not be happy about that. Yet when it comes to obesity, we can't talk about this. When you talk about why do certain areas have a lower amount of supermarkets, why do certain areas don't have certain green grass? When you talk about these numbers, you talk about these figures, and yes, it just happens to be majority of black people is a higher density of people of color in cities than there is in the rural areas. You go to these flyover counties and cities and villages and towns, and you find those states are like 95% white. You go to a place like New York City, and it's like 30%, like I think Chicago is the highest one. It's like 35% black people. Yet in the nation, it's 14%. So you look at the white people in the city, and they have a higher rate of infection of COVID, just like the people in the outskirts. And there might be an inverse here, where there might be something where like white people in the countryside seem to be heavier. I guess it might depend on state by state. But I think you'll see certain comparisons. So when you're actually talking about these actual figures, is it comparing apples to apples? I don't necessarily think so. But then you look at some of the recent protests and recent events that are happening in certain areas. If you were actually starting a chain of supermarkets, would you want to go to these inner city areas that are dense with people who are people of color and things like that, after seeing what has happened with the damage and with the violence and the riots and the looting and the vandalization of these places, peaceful protests, would you want to go and establish there? Who's actually going to come to these places? When it comes down to shaming, when it comes to these internal things, who shames who? Who says, oh, you're eating this? Who says we need to go to this food? Who kind of encourages these things? Where is the messaging coming from in these things? Where is the parents? Where are the responsibility for the actual parents? You're saying you're targeting parents here. You're shaming the parents that, oh, your kids are getting to a situation where they're fighting over who eats more. That should be something shameful. Now, there might be a better way to message that, but I think the actual messaging itself of it being a shameful situation, if your overweight son is sitting there in a competition with another boy about you who can eat more, I think you should feel ashamed about that. I would personally feel ashamed about that. I don't know why you wouldn't feel this is shameful. Some things you should be ashamed of. And these are the things that go into the sins. These are the things that if you choose to do something, if you can do something different. I don't feel ashamed of anything that my ancestors did because I wasn't there to do anything. I wasn't there to change it. I don't feel ashamed about the things that happened in my past that might have harmed me, that might have gotten me to a situation where I sought out food in order to actually satiate myself, in order to fill that need, fill that hole that I had in myself, to feel that little pleasure, to get that little kick of endorphins or dopamine and whatnot. So those things in the past are in the past. I was not aware of those things. I was a child in some cases. But part of being part of a society, being a responsible part of society, like they're saying, be responsible, wear a mask. Be responsible, keep things shut down. You just want to get a haircut. You're just like Nancy Pelosi. You want to go out and get a haircut? No. You got to keep stuff shut down. Oh, you just want to do this. You want to do that. You want to kill grandma. It's supposed to be responsible. It's supposed to be part of society. What is that? What is that responsibility? That is shaming language. Without responsibility, you don't have shame. Without feeling you are personally accountable for something, what is the shame to feel like? I don't feel ashamed of what some Eskimo is doing in in the Antarctica or the Arctic. I don't feel it because I have nothing to do with that Eskimo. I can't stop or change or affect what that Eskimo is doing. But if I personally decide to just go out and order 2 pizzas and just eat that and decide I'm just going to sit down and do nothing for the rest of the day, that is something that could be shameful because I know I could do better. I know there's something I can change. There's something that I directly did in that. So to end this, and thank you for listening, go back to what I said at the start. Now that deaths with X plus comorbidities establish the danger of X, what mandates and laws would you support to combat obesity? Has your answer to that changed as you listen to me talk, or have you thought of other things? Have you thought of ways to debate or counter people? Do you think more should be done? If it's this whole thing where we need to change the messaging, we need to care more about what people's feelings are, because if you do this, if you talk to people about this, they'll eat more. They'll actually have a chance to be even more obese. Should we imagine if you had a COVID acceptance thing? Said, oh, you're just virophobic. You're ronophobic. 99.9% of the people who have it, they don't die from it. How do you know I'm spreading it? I don't even know I have it. Like, I'm healthy. Look at me. I'm okay. Would you support that? If people were like, oh, no, you have to treat me nicely. You have to tell me nicely. How dare you shame me about not wearing a mask? How dare you tell me I can't social distance? How dare you tell me that? Oh, you want to build these big rooms where we have to be 6 feet apart? No, maybe I feel like being close to people. Maybe I have a condition where I feel paranoid when people are so spread apart from me. So we have to adjust things. Oh, that seat is too small for average people, making seats for average people, and now we have to make bigger seats to deal with a small percentage of the population that happens to be obese, so we need to adjust this. How about you adjust society to the people who don't want to wear masks? Like, what is the situation here? That's one of the things that we'll see with this, and I hope one of the things, and I think that's one thing that people have seen with the comorbidity situation, where just having one thing, it's how things are connected, not just when you come to the health things, but people have seen the connections and happening in other parts of life. How when you start this, these other things happen. This person over there does something, let's say we're going to do this, these other people look at what that person is doing and copy it and do it. The messaging that's involved in this thing, is this necessarily necessary? The people who are organizing the steps to actually avoid this issue, do you really trust their estimation of what that issue is, let alone any of the things that they're going to say are going to actually address that issue? Once you find out that information has changed on this, do these people change? Do these people say, okay, we were wrong about that, and now we're going to change this? Or do people say, okay, once we've established this is a threat, we're also going to use this same threat protocol and transfer it to these other things that are threats? Because one thing you are seeing right now are people are saying, oh, look, we did this that happened to actually help the threat, supposed threat of this COVID-19, but now we need to switch this and do it to climate change. But if somebody says, oh, these shutdowns, these limitations of borders and travel, let's actually take that same ability and do it to the threats that comes from illegal immigration, we're like, oh, no, you can't talk about that. You can't use it for that. That's a different thing. So these kind of questions are going to come up that I think are going to be interesting to see, that I'll have an eye on, that I'm sure I'm probably going to be talking about a few of those topics later on. Let me know what you thought about this. I appreciate you taking your time. As I mentioned, there's different designs going on the screen. I don't think it was going to be just the gluttony thing, because I think the speed drawing of that is about 15 minutes. So I might have had it going one way and then going backwards, and then I might have just had different things with the other clowns. I think I would have the other clowns going on. I'm not quite sure what was on there, but there's a merchandise store right there. I'm working on getting an independent store up, but right now there's a Redbubble store. You can go there and click on it. One of the main sellers is this Thomas Sowell 3, where you ask 3 questions about people on the political left, about economic issues, but I apply it to the other parts of life. Those questions are: compared to what, at what cost, and what solid proof do you have? And I'll apply them to this question right here. When you talk about obesity, obesity is still healthy. Compared to what? What is the actual compared to health that you have? Do you have a situation where you were not obese, a person to compare yourself to and say, that's actually me as a healthy person? Then we say, at what cost? When you come to these prevention steps of obesity, what is the cost? What is the cost of you being obese on greater society and yourself? What are you limiting yourself on? What are you actually gaining? When it comes to these mandates that we're saying, actually address any of the actual issues that exist from something like obesity or the threat of this current virus. So these are just things that you can ask yourself, and the things that I helped, this sort of things helped me recover from, be this recovering fat person and this be in this journey of fixing that. And the things that made me navigate what's going on with this pandemic and not be as panicked as I've seen some people and be like, okay, this is a potential risk. These are the things I can do to change. I understand I can improve my situation by increasing myself to get into a better physical health. So if I get anything that's uncontrollable, that is outside of my personal responsibility, what is my personal responsibility in order to get myself to be at as healthy a base state to actually deal with any things that are outside of my control? So those are kind of things to think about. And yeah, so that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for taking your time to listen. Till next time. Videos right now, the main place I'm going to be posting content for now until I get my personal portal up and going, will be on YouTube, and there will be content posted on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays for the foreseeable future. I'm going to be having some more shorter ones, but I'm going to be going towards these longer form videos where I talk about at least 3 different things in the video, try to tie them together, and then also have these conversation series where I'm actually talking to people about different topics. So that's it for now. Hit that merchandise store up, and again, remember to like, share, subscribe so you can hit that notification bell as well if you're listening to this on YouTube or BitChute, and you can get notifications. Till next time, goodbye.